Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Serious Strategy Gamer and I'm very excited because today we'll be starting a new series, in fact a dual series of Hearts of Iron 4 and War in the West. And the reason for that is I've been reading up a little bit about strategic bombing in World War II and especially got my hands on the strategic bombing survey of the United States after the war. So I wanted to explore this topic a little bit in games, and Hearts of Iron 4 is really one of these games where you can try out things historically. So we will be playing here as the United Kingdom, and we're going to see just how viable it is going to be to use strategic bombers and really focus on that weapon and see where that gets us. So this is not going to be a world conquest approach or anything. We're just going to start here with historical focuses and everything, and we're going to see what is going to happen, whether the strategic bomber can be used here as a weapon to bring down the Germans, or at least bring them close to collapse. So I feel like quite often strategic bombers in Hearts of Iron are a little bit overlooked. They are not used that often. They don't have the best reputation. Maybe that's perfectly valid, but I want to find out whether that is actually, warranted, or whether we can in fact use them to good effect over here. So while I'll be doing that, I'll be talking a little bit about the strategic or the historical background of that strategy. But you know what, let's set up the game first and see what's going on. And of course we're going to start here with the national focus. Let's briefly look at our nation. I mean, most of you will know that United Kingdom set up not yet in an alliance with France, but Germany of course is expected to be our rival here. And we have a couple of negative things going here. London Naval Treaty will limit our naval building capabilities. That's not quite as bad. This one is pretty bad. The war to end all wars, so with the Great War in recent memory, we have very few people here, but that corresponds very well to an air strategy, I think. We do have decent stability, so that's nice, but yeah, let's pick up our national focus. And you know what, I love this so much that you can zoom out here finally. There are a couple of things that you can do. I think one of the very nice things to go for early on might be to encourage the colonial elite, because it's a 7% research speed bonus. But I think limited rearmament is going to be the best thing here that we can do in the very short run. This will give us 4 more civilian factories, and civilian factories will allow us to build military factories, and that will allow us to build more bombers, and specifically, of course, strategic bombers. So, speaking of factories, of course we do have 3 military factories. I'm going to build a single civilian factory here. You know what? We're going to build 2 civilian factories, but no more. So that's going to be it. We're going to build that in London and in Sussex over here. And after that, we are going to concentrate very heavily on the building of military factories. And we're going to concentrate our efforts here on the high infrastructure areas, because of course these are the most effective ones where we can build stuff. So that should set up very nicely this part of the game. Let's look at the research. We're going to go and start with a fairly standard opening here, basic machinery tools for the production efficiency cap, construction 1, so that we can build stuff a little bit faster. And that's very nice. We're going to go into engineering, and we're going to go for mechanical computing, because again that's a very nice boost, and that basically already sets up our most important research over here. Now we could of course directly go for something like a strategic bomber, and I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing to do, because that is definitely what we want to go for, but I also think we could potentially go for strategic destruction first. And of course one of the things that we do need to be mindful about is that we probably, you know what, let's start with the production of the heavy fighter, and I think that will go very nicely, because I think once we have the strategic bomber, we definitely want to use the appropriate aircraft design over here, so that will be alright. And I think going here for the heavy fighter first is going to be useful, because one of the crucial things is of course we want to have escort fighters to accompany our people when they do fly over Germany eventually. Now we are producing a couple of things over here. Let's not build any further tanks. I think that's going to be fine. We're going to just get rid of all of this naval stuff here quite quickly. Let's actually do give priority here to the Arc Royale. I think that's going to be fine. But yeah, we're really not going to focus on naval technology this time around. Of course, we're going to build a little bit of that while we're doing this over here. So let's build a little bit more support equipment. We're going to build a little bit of infantry equipment while we are waiting for our new aircraft designs to come in. So that I think should be pretty much alright like that. So that's perfectly fine. And we're not going to deal with too many of these divisions just yet. Is that actually a good design over here? It's not a very good design over here. But yeah, let's go ahead and train up a couple of infantry divisions then. Just a couple of ones. So we're going to build them sort of indefinitely. I think that's going to be alright. Unassigned divisions, I'm probably going to deal with that in between episodes, so you don't have to watch me doing that. And we don't really have any decisions that we could take, do we? No, we could take these, but that would cost us political stability, and I don't want to do that just right now. So, last thing we need to do before we really set up the rest of the game here is we are just going to pick all of these aircrafts here, so all of these guys over there, all of these guys over here. I think we might have some further down here. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, we're going to grab all of these land-based aircraft, and we're just going to disband all of these squadrons because I don't really like that. It's just a bit too messy. So we're going to go to the Greater London area, or at least actually down here into Sussex, and we're going to pick a couple of interwar fighters here. And I suppose, well, we do have like, okay, let's build. I don't really like groups of 300. They don't really work that well. Okay, let's pick groups of 200 here each. I think that's going to be fine. So yeah, we will have 3 groups of normal fighters here. These are interwar fighters. We're not going to very much focus on that, but we're going to send these people here to do exercises. And that's going to be fine, so that we have some more technology there. And you know what? It's pretty much the same here with the tactical bombers, which we might actually want to group over here into sort of Gloucester. So that's fine. And since we are here over already, let's go ahead and pick up a couple of close air support, and I think that's fine as well. There we go. Yeah, and you're going to train over here, and that's going to be alright. Fine, fantastic. So that's it in terms of the training over here. And lastly, just to finish up a couple of things here, we are going to send at least sort of the battle cruisers and the... So you guys do form a new fleet here, and you're going to go ahead and do naval exercises until you're fully trained up as well. So that's it. I don't think we have to do that much more right away. Let's start the game over here and let's start to see what's going on while I talk a little bit about the background here. So excuse me for setting up this so slowly, but yeah, it's going to take a while always to set up a game. So the reason why I really think this is so interesting, and let me just stop again. No, I don't think we need rubber. We're not going to use steel or any of that, so that's going to be alright. Yeah, there we go. Decision available, King George V dies. That's unfortunate. It does lose us quite a bit of stability. Not that much that we can do. And we can think about the Dutch thingy here. We're going to ignore that here for a moment, because I don't think it's that relevant. Yeah, but what I really want to do is talk a little bit about the very broad background here in this part of the series about the strategic aspects of strategic bombing. And in the War of the West series, which is going to be starting in 1943, and which is much more granularly supposed to be like this type of war game, much more serious, with counters and everything, and a very detailed simulation of each individual aircraft. There we're going to look at the target selection mechanisms, because of course in Hearts of Iron 4 they are a little bit more open. There we go. Germans remilitarized the Rhineland. That's fine. We do have limited rearmament, so that's nice. We could of course go ahead here with motorized army, but again we're not really interested in that. We are strategic bombers, so that I think is very fine. Any of the other items are not yet on the table because of the limitations to the world tension and our war support here, which is of course extremely low. So these are not things that we can do. So really what we can do is go to these political things over here. We could do a change in course, but we don't really want to do that. We would probably want to go steady as she goes, which would give us a little bit more stability, which is nice. Home defense is also okay-ish because it gives us a little bit more war support. And then again, issuing war masks and all of that path down here is very nice as well. That being said, I think we're going to reinforce the Empire over here and try to encourage colonial elites, and then ultimately we want to go to the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, because that has historically been one of the cornerstones of British air power in World War II, to involve all of the colonies. So yeah, we're going to go ahead here with what does that actually do? I think it doesn't really do that much. Okay, base stability plus 10%, gain some experience over here, so all of that is going to be useful, but not very much so. We do have a bit of an oil problem and shortage over here, so we do need to be mindful about that. And that is because all of you guys are training, whereas I didn't really want to train all of you. But I suppose that's fine. I mean, most of you guys have by now trained up actually, so I think we can actually stop your naval exercises here, build up the oil supply a little bit, and that should be okay. I mean, all of our air guys are training too, but that should be okay. Ethiopia capitulating brings up world tension a little bit, which is okay. We do need that to come up. So, 1936. A very interesting year for strategic bombing thinking, because this is the year where in the United Kingdom, historically, Bomber Command is being founded. Bomber Command is the organization within the RAF, within the Royal Air Force, that will ultimately carry out all of these bombing campaigns. And it is extremely interesting to consider their history and so on, because they are really, you know what, I think all of these things are irrelevant over here, so let's ignore that. And other events or decisions, I think there is some naval treaty stuff, that's not really that important. Modify government, we could do that, but I think the only really truly relevant bits are for the moment either the military factory construction speed or the silent workhorse. Now the silent workhorse is only going to become effective, that's like basically 0.3 political power, so honestly not that much. So that takes about 1,000 days to recover, so basically like 3 years, by which point we're probably going to be at war. So I'm not really convinced that this is a good investment right away. So I think what we're going to do here is pick Maxwell Aitken to go for the military factory construction speed. Yeah, and I think that's fine. Good, there we go. We are probably still building the civilian factories. Well, one of them at least. We've done basic machinery tools, that's fine. There's a good debate around whether we want to go for concentrated industry or dispersed industry. Personally, I do very much like concentrated industry, because the factory output plus 15%, that's just so much better than the plus 10%, and it really stacks over time. And we are probably going to concentrate very heavily on very few individual production lines. So if you think about dispersed industry, that gives you production efficiency retention and a higher base. So this is really better for a longer time. But conversion speed bonus is also nice. But you know what, we're going to go for concentrated industry. I think it's just going to be better over time. Yeah, there we go, and that's nice. Good. So, 1936, Bomber Command has just been founded. This is based on, well, basically the military thinking about an Italian, Giulio Doha, or Doha, I don't know how you pronounce him really. And he is very influential in the First World War. He's not quite influential. He's thinking in the First World War about how to overcome this problem of the trenches and what you can really do with air power as you are going to go ahead. And, well, I think this is pretty irrelevant. Some of these things here are nice, especially the gain base war support. But for now, let's try to go for the R&D stuff here. Right. And Giulio Doha is extremely interesting because he's witnessing this carnage in World War I. He's a very outspoken character, and he's witnessing like the Italian-Austrian front and sort of the horror of the trenches. So he really thinks, okay, there's something that needs to be done, and he's an airman. He's been an airman since, I think, 1912 or something, and he really thinks wait, one of the areas how we can overcome this is air power. And air power is something that is very novel at this point. And he is quite revolutionary in that he thinks we could probably just go ahead and fly over the enemy front lines and strike at their industrial heartland and really make life much more difficult for them in that aspect. So strike, fly over, circumvent the entire enemy army, circumvent all of this bloody issue in the... Yeah, I think we're going to go for the historical option here. So the idea really becomes at, striking at Graz or even Vienna just by flying over the enemy trench lines and taking out their industrial bases. And that really becomes the thinking of the time in some air circles. And that thinking in particular in the UK is being taken up by a gentleman called Hugh Trenchard. And he is really the person who is founding the... Oh, wait a minute, we should really do that differently. And go actually for the heavy fighter over here, because the heavy fighters are something that we definitively want to use. So let's build a good number of them. Well, we're of course also building up a little bit over here. I don't think we're going to go ahead with any more normal fighters. So again, just focus on the heavy fighters. And they are going to be extremely useful to us, I hope at least. How are you guys doing down here? You still have a weird element here, so let's limit that to this point. And all of you guys do please go ahead and continue your training. Do continue your training, please. Come on, that's not really that much longer, is it? Yeah, there we go. And at that point, I think our fuel reserves will recover as well. So, by 1928, Hugh Trenchard publishes his view on air power, and it's really similar to the thinking of the Italians earlier, or at least of Giulio Douhet earlier, as he really insists on that principle of the bomber might always come through, and a future war wouldn't really be decided in the timescales that you've seen in the First World War. It would merely be decided on something very much shorter time frame. So potentially you might have the situation where an enemy might appear, you're sending out your bomber fleets, you're destroying his industry within just 1 or 2 days or even hours, and at that point they would be forced to surrender already because they couldn't bring up anything anymore. So now the world tension has increased a little bit, and I think at this point we could go for the shadow scheme, which is going to be nice but not crucial, but it would allow us to get to the extra research slot. Or we could go for the research speed plus 7%. Let's briefly consider that. We have 4 research slots, so 7% bonus is nice. Another research slot would be effectively a 20% bonus though. For another research slot we do have to spend 210 days to do that. This is going to be pretty much irrelevant because it's only going to come into effect once we enter war. 2 research bonuses for industry are very nice though. Yeah, I think we're going to go the slightly slower route. Doesn't have an immediate effect, but it will be useful over time. So yeah, I think this is going to be the slightly faster approach here. So, historically, the thinking develops. There's an enemy, you send out your bombers, they reduce his industry very quickly, and you're left the winner because they have to surrender at that point, because World War I was a very attritional type of warfare, and at that point you really start to realize that they cannot really continue their warfare if at that point their industry is in rubble. There's a dark element to that too, because a lot of these people start to think about the effect of civilian morale of strategic bombing, and whether or not you might induce people to revolt against their government and make war at that point pointless if you can demonstrate to them that they are quite vulnerable in this modern type of warfare. So other than in World War I, where really the front line and the hinterland were very disconnected pieces, in the future war you would have that situation where the civilian population would be exposed to the horrors of war, and maybe therefore they wouldn't necessarily want to go to war in the first place. And I think that's quite interesting, because while none of these people are truly any sort of pacifist or anything like that, you can't really go that far, they are definitely thinking about the horrors of war, and they want to stop them to some degree. Speaking of, I think we have to think a little bit about active sonar and other things over here, as we are finishing up some of the naval building. So yeah, I think that's going to be okay. Ooh, and we do modify our government because we are researching the strategic bombers. That's going to be done in 70 days. So yeah, let's go ahead here and pick Avro for 10% more strategic bombers and a little bit more air research speed. So that's nice. Does give us some political power, and I think we probably want to match the Germans here, at least in the Netherlands. So yeah, let's do that, and that's fine. Shadow scheme done as well. Perfect. As we said, we're going to go for industrial effort here. That's going to be nice. We're going to send some help to the Portuguese, certainly, because that will allow us to get more civilian factories, and that's perfectly fine. Lovely. We are building up some fuel reserves here, so that's good too. Right. The future air war. Now, in 1928, that proposition meets a lot of resistance, especially from the Admiralty, so from the naval establishments in the United Kingdom, but also from the army, really. And all of these people are thinking two things, and, well, three things maybe. So they're thinking, firstly, maybe quite understandably, that this is going to diminish their role in a future war, because effectively, the army really isn't there to do much at all. The army really, in this type of thinking, is pretty much only there to actually fly over the enemy, provide a little bit of a speed bump while the air crew do their job in the enemy hinterland. And the Navy really thinks in similar lines that, you know, their strategic thinking has been sort of overtaken by that new dimension, by that three-dimensionality of airspace. So both the Navy and the Army are skeptical, mostly because they already think that this isn't necessarily something that is going to be very helpful to them. So there's this institutional bias against something that is new and that is going to overtake them. But more importantly, for the United Kingdom, they make the slightly more valid point of saying, well, the United Kingdom isn't necessarily naturally very this is not a type of warfare that the United Kingdom is necessarily going to be very happy about and very well positioned to fight. Because, and this is a little bit counterintuitive if you look back at World War II and what actually happened, this island position of the United Kingdom does put it out of harm's way, so that's actually nice, but does it really? If the enemy does employ similar thinking and they employ strategic bombers or heavy bombers to attack your urban centers and your centers of production, you can see the way from, let's say, the Low Countries or France to London is extremely short. Even very, very unmodern aircraft can fly that distance very easily and can bring to bear a huge payload on London. Whereas conversely, if you're sending a bomber from, let's say, London to Berlin, that is going to be a huge distance for you to cover, and a lot of that distance is going to be over the enemy country. So it will be disproportionately difficult to strike from the United Kingdom at the enemy than it is for the enemy to strike at you. So the United Kingdom really doesn't seem to be very well positioned for that. More importantly, a lot of the towns like Dover, like Norwich, like Portsmouth, Bristol, all of the cities really like very on the coastline or very close to it. So you really don't have any advance warning. You don't really have a chance to scramble fighters. Remember, these are the days before any radar technology. So people at that point were relying mostly on sight or even sound to detect aircraft that are coming in. And you have these huge acoustic dishes that do concentrate sound. And it will be very difficult for anyone to protect, let's say, Norwich or Dover from aerial attack. And even London, even though it's a little bit more inland, is going to be super exposed to that. So that is obviously a problem for the United Kingdom. And therefore they think, well, it's really not for us to start this type of warfare. And we really should not do that. So theorist, we could go for Arthur Harris. We're going to talk about him a little bit more later on. Don't think it's quite the time for that though. So either we could go for the industrial concern. Are we researching any of that anymore? Well, we are a little bit. Yeah, I think it might be time for AIOC, British Petrol, here. Oh, we don't really have enough political power yet. Sorry, I thought. I just went with this, but there's a discount here, so yeah. Industrial efforts done, that's nice. Let's go for the extra research slot, that's gonna be okay. And then, what did we just research? I think something naval, yeah, active sonar. Let's go for the depth charge thrower here, and that's gonna be fine. Yeah, and then soon we're gonna go for the industrial concern over here. Yeah, there we go, fantastic. Right, and at that point, you know, this thinking gets a little bit thrown to the rear seat. And it's only really a couple of years later, in 1936, when Hugh Trenchard has actually resigned. He actually tried to resign in 1927, but they quite wouldn't let him. So he's maintained the Royal Air Force as an independent agency. But at this point, he has not really established Bomber Command yet. And in 1936, that starts to change, because now the technological foundation is there a little bit more. And the UK is starting to realize that there's actually a potential enemy brewing with Germany, and of course the rise of the parties over there. Whereas in 1928 that really hadn't been a prospect yet. In 1928 the UK was still operating under the so-called 10-year plan. So basically the military was told to not consider any potential hostilities, any war scenario within the next 10 years, and they were to base their thinking around the situation that in the next 10 years would always be peaceful, and that was on a rolling sort of forecast basis. So where you always thought, okay, there's not going to be in a war at any time between 1918 to 1928, then from 1919 to 1929, and so on and so forth. And of course, by 1928 that meant no war until 1938. So very long time where there really isn't any war happening. I'm thinking here that probably we want to already establish Royal Ordnance factories. This is going to be super useful for us because it's going to give us 6 more military factories, and right now we only have 21. So yeah, that's going to be a huge bond here for us. That's going to be nice. It's also going to give us this new research slot, which we do want to use to do what exactly then? So we are researching most of these things here in industrial bases. Let's go for the improved machinery tools, but also fuel refining is quite tempting. And I think this has the higher base cost, so let's actually use that first, because that applies our bonus to something that is taking longer, and therefore it's slightly more efficient. Right. So, 1936 comes around. UK realizes Germany might be a threat, and they are starting to realize that, you know, even though the UK might not be the one that necessarily wants to start this type of war, she might still be exposed to this type of warfare just by virtue of the enemy taking that. And you know, one thing that we completely forgot is I should actually at least use you guys to train up, because that is definitely going to bring up our army experience here a little bit. And our army experience does need at least one thing, and that is, if we look at our infantry division, they are an awkward combat width of 18, so let's add at least 1 infantry division here, and that's going to be useful. Right, there we go. And that's fine. Research slot here, we did just do construction, so that's fantastic. Let's go for this is going to be 75 days, this is going to be 47, but this is going to be super useful for the production efficiency cap. Where are we standing in terms of our production efficiency here? Yeah, it could definitely go up a little bit more. So let's actually go ahead with that. I also think in terms of production we should actually start to look at strategic bombers here. Can we create a variant? So another engine wouldn't really help us that much. Bombing would only be a very, very small, like 3% addition here. It would decrease our range, so I don't think that's something that we necessarily want. Halifax bombers, reliability, it's kind of nice but not crucial. Better range, well, I think that is something that we might want to buff up more substantially later on. So you know what, we are actually going to produce you like that, and instead We're going to, of course, retire all of these guys over here because they're not really that useful anymore. I don't really want to build any of that. But for the Blenheims here, what happens if I do buff your range? Yeah, I think that might be useful so that we are slightly better. But I can't do that at the same time here. So yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, good. So we're now actually producing these strategic bombers, and that's fine. Let's get rid of the tactical bomber here. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to produce it a little bit like that. So that we are producing more heavy fighters, but with a definitive increase in the strategic bombers as we are getting more and more items over here. And Royal Ordnance Factories are going to come into play very soon as well, so that's nice. Okay, lastly, political... Well, we could really add all of these guys. Maybe we're going to go for the silent workhorse over here so that we have an increase in political power generation. That's going to be nice. Depth charge thrower here. It's going to be very useful because one of the menaces that we're going to face is U-boats. That being said, I think that was a very good place to put in a cut. So, thank you very much for watching. Do let me know whether you enjoyed the intro here, whether you enjoy this little mixture of historical and gameplay features. I very much look forward to this series and also the War on the West series. So if you do like, let's say, a little bit more detailed wargaming, do take a look over there as well. Yeah, hope you enjoyed. Do leave a like and all of that, especially for the first episode in the new series. That's always super helpful. So, thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. See you then. Bye bye.